Who can tell me what the title of my presentation is today? I haven't seen your schedule. What's this? Teaching science from the Bible. All right. Well, my name is Kristina McFeeters, for those who don't know me. I was supposed to be here Wednesday night, and I will tell you more of the story this afternoon, but it ended up our local school system scheduled a back-to-school expo for the entire county school district, and they asked me to do a health expo for the kids yesterday. So yesterday I was working with over 60 kids and teaching them about the 8 laws of health. We had a blast. Finished last night at 6 o'clock, got everything taken down, and then I had a tourism commission meeting at 6 o'clock. That ended at 7, and then I loaded my car and I drove here, and I got here at 4 o'clock this morning. So I am thankful to be here with you, and I ask for your prayers for me that my brain can stay alert while I share with you this morning. So let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our precious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the blessing that we have to study and learn how to understand science from the Bible. Father, there's so much that you have in store for us, and I just ask as we take this little bit of time right now, that your presence will be here, that your Holy Spirit will teach us, and that we may come forth not only knowing how to teach science from the Bible, but how to understand you better. We thank you in Jesus' name, amen. So a little bit of my background. I was homeschooled all my life, and I'm very thankful for it. The only school I went to was a Bible college called Awachita Hills, and I graduated with a degree in personal ministry. And one of the things that really transformed my personal homeschool experience was being able to learn from the Bible. You know, it's one thing when you can just go outside and you can learn to identify all the trees, and you can learn to identify all the flowers, and you can learn to identify all the birds, and you know, after a while you just get tired of identification, right? Anybody there yet? Okay. And so then you can go into the anatomy, right? You can start learning about biology, like how the flowers grow, how things work, and you know, the scientific systems, and then you can learn about, you know, the anatomy of the animals and the birds and how they work. But after a while, you can get tired of that too. And the only thing that makes it come alive, the missing puzzle piece, is the Bible. And when you can start seeing how the Bible and nature and science and biology and identification, all this stuff connect into one whole, that's when I personally, as a student, got excited about school. I was actually in 5th grade when I started learning the concept of understanding science from the Bible. And I remember one of the first Bible studies that I ever did on science from the Bible was on a snowflake. And in fact, I guess I left it in the car, but I actually brought my study with me. In my study notebook that I had, I was 10 years old, and I was so amazed. I didn't know there was so much about snowflakes in the Bible, and so many things that you could learn, and I was just so excited. This was a whole lot more interesting than just looking out the window at the snowflakes falling or catching them in your hand, you know? Because it brought a depth of meaning, and it helped me personally connect it to my life today. Here is how learning about a snowflake can help me grow closer to God. And that's when school comes alive, okay? And there are so many different resources that you can use. Of course, you can do a lot on your own, but sometimes, especially starting out, it's like, how do I teach science from the Bible, you know? Where do I start? And so I want to show you today is just one series of the many, many resources that you can use. There's resources that you can download from the Sunlight materials on nature, and they're absolutely amazing, and you can download those for free on the internet. But what I want to show you today is a set of materials that was actually produced by a gentleman by the name of Pastor Terry McComb. Have any of you heard of him? Pastor Terry McComb came to my church to present nature when I was 11 years old. That's when I first met him. And I don't know what it was about listening to him, but I said, someday I'm going to teach nature like he does. And it was always my goal to be like Pastor Terry McComb. And the funny thing was, I only saw him once when I was 11 years old, and I did not see him again until I was 20. And he came to my church. I was at a different church then. I'd moved. And he came to my church to speak, and I was like, this is that same guy. You know, this is that guy that came when I was a kid, and he's still doing the same presentations. And so I was so excited. I actually figured out what house he was staying in, and I drove to where he was staying so I could personally talk to him. And I was like, I want to be like you. I want to be able to teach nature from the Bible like you do. And so as a result of that interview when I was 20, I actually, because he lives in Canada, I became his distributor for the United States for all of his materials. And so they're all in a bedroom in my house because shipping across the Canadian border is very expensive. Of course, he does all the shipping to Canada, and I do all the shipping to the United States. So I want to show you some of his books and actually give you some ideas on how to use them. And I think you're going to be really excited about this, because you can do this for more than just school. You can also do this for, you know, I have met people who have done his materials for prayer meeting, okay? This isn't just for kids. This is for all ages. You can also do it for vacation Bible schools. You can do it for personal devotions. There's so many ways that you can use it. So we're going to journey into the Bible because Kimberly is currently printing out my handouts for you, so I'll give them to you in a few minutes. But let's journey into the Bible first. To the book of Isaiah. And we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 38. And I'm going to tell you the story because I love stories. So I'm going to tell you the story, okay? So the story goes that there was a king in Israel, and his name was Hezekiah. Anyone know the story of Hezekiah? Hezekiah was a very God-fearing man, and he did righteous things in Israel, and because of that, God really blessed him, and things were going well in his kingdom. And all of a sudden, he got sick. And so he started praying, as we all do, that he would get better, right? And instead of sending him a comforting message, God sent the prophet Isaiah to Hezekiah, and he said, Hezekiah, I'm really sorry about this, but you're going to die. Now, how would you feel if you were sick and a prophet came to you, to your house, by your sick bedside and said, God told me to tell you you're going to die? Well, obviously Hezekiah didn't either. And he's like, wait a second, God, there's a mistake here. Don't you realize what I have done for you? Don't you realize how I've lived for you, how I've served you, how I've helped all of Israel to come closer to you? Why on earth are you going to let me die? And please, God, please just work a miracle and heal me anyway. Change your mind. How many of you have asked God to change his mind? Now, I will say, in a lot of situations, God doesn't change his mind because he knows what is best. And even in Hezekiah's case, he knew what was best. But because Hezekiah pleaded and begged so hard, the prophet Isaiah wasn't even back to his house yet. When God comes back to Isaiah and says, wait a second, now I want you to turn around and go back to Hezekiah and tell the king that I heard his prayers and I'm going to extend his life. Anybody know by how long? 15 years. Okay, that's a significant life expansion, okay? Of course, we don't know how old Hezekiah was, but we can imagine that, you know, he was up there in years, and 15 years is a long time when God just told you you're going to die of a sickness, right? So Isaiah turns and he goes to Hezekiah and he says, God told me to tell you that he's heard your prayers, he's going to extend your life 15 years, and Hezekiah says, wow, that's wonderful, but how do I know for sure that God's really going to do this? You sense a little doubt there? God, are you really going to change your mind? I'm not sure you're going to change your mind. So I want proof you're going to change your mind. So I'm going to go and I ask for a sign that you're going to change your mind. I want to watch the sun go backwards on the sundial. Anybody know what a sundial is? Have any of you kids ever made a sundial? They're a lot of fun to make. You can make it out in your backyard with some sticks and a bunch of stakes, and you can make your own sundial, or you can do it with a piece of wood. There's a lot of different ways that you could make your own sundial. But that was the way they told time. They didn't have nice clocks and watches like we do today. The sun was the only way they told time. And so he says, I want the sun to go backwards so I can watch the time go backwards on the clock. That's a pretty hard request, don't you think? Make the sun go backwards. Like, the only other time it's recorded in history that the sun stopped was when Joshua told it to stand still, right? But he says, no, I don't want just to stop. I want it to go backwards. So God did what Hezekiah requested. And he looking out the window at his sundial, and sure enough, the shadow went backwards. Can you imagine like watching a clock and seeing it go backwards all of a sudden? Clocks don't do that, right? Well, the sun doesn't either. But God made it happen. And Hezekiah was so excited because he knew for sure that he was going to be healed. And so God instructed Isaiah to do some natural remedies. Anyone know what those natural remedies were? Fig poultice, right? Make a poultice of figs, and he was healed. Now, there was somebody else that was affected by this sun going backwards. The whole world, right? I mean, if the sun goes backwards in Hezekiah's backyard, there's only one sun, right? So at least we know half of the world that had daylight during that time. Of course, the other half had night, right? So the night wasn't affected, except maybe that their night was, that much longer. But the world that had daylight, it wasn't just Hezekiah that was affected. They were all affected. And especially one group of people, anyone know who they were? The Babylonians. Now, why would this make the Babylonians upset? They worship the sun. Okay? So if you had a God that was always going forward and always conquering and never ever went backwards and never had any defeat, and all of a sudden he went backwards, what would you think? There's something bigger than my God out there, right? Why did my God go backwards? Like, this is serious business. And so the Babylonians sent a delegation to Hezekiah. Now, they didn't specifically say to Hezekiah why they came, but they specifically were instructed by the Babylonian king, I want you to find out the secret of Hezekiah, because we heard that he was the one that asked the sun to go backwards. And if his God is bigger than our God, we want to know something about it. So just go pay a visit to Hezekiah. So these top officials from Babylon come to visit King Hezekiah. And what did Hezekiah do? Showed him his stuff. Now let me ask you, did Hezekiah's stuff make the sun go backwards? No. Like, Hezekiah had this beautiful opportunity to witness and say, hey, listen, I want to tell you what God has done for me. God healed me. He promised to add 15 years to my life, and he made the sun go backwards. Let me tell you about this God. And those people from Babylon, they wouldn't have even had to ask. They shouldn't have had to ask anything. That should have been the first thing he told them, right? I mean, if we're excited about what God has done for us, don't we want to share? But instead, he showed them all his stuff. Why? Now, let me ask you, kids. When your friends come over to visit you, what's the first thing that you show them? I want to hear a kid answer me. Somebody answer me. What's the first thing that you show your friends when they come over to visit you?
Your toys.
Your toys, right? Of course. Well, Hezekiah was no different. He showed them all his toys, only his toys were bigger than yours. I think we have handouts now.
Right here.
I'm going to walk in circles here. All right. So what does all this have to do with nature? Obviously, there's one more part to the story, and that is God sent Isaiah back to King Hezekiah again, didn't he? With what? A rebuke. And he said, because you showed those men all your stuff, all of your stuff will eventually be taken to Babylon, and your grandkids too. Well, first he said, your kids. Well, Hezekiah prayed again. He's like, no, God, not in my lifetime. And so God says, okay, I'll make it happen after you die, so at least you won't see it. I forgive you, but it's still going to happen. If you were to think of a character quality that's kind of apparent in this Bible story, what would you choose? Nobody? I'm not saying there's any right or wrong answers. Mercy, okay. Yeah, because God showed mercy to King Hezekiah, right? How about something that King Hezekiah should have had but didn't? Humility. Yes. Humility. If King Hezekiah had had humility before God, because remember, it started at the very beginning when he said, God, why are you going to let me die? Look at all I've done for you. Did you catch that? If King Hezekiah had humility, he wouldn't have said that either. And that was the seed that continued to grow, and it bore fruit when those people from Babylon came, and in all of his pride, he showed them all his stuff, right? So humility is what we need to have. Humility before God. It's not what we've done, it's what God is doing through us. And how can his name be glorified, right? Not ours. So I'm going to pass this out. I will keep one, and maybe you can help me pass them out. Everybody gets one. What are these? Can anyone see them? What kind of flowers? Anyone guess? Anyone on the front row, can you tell? What does it look like?
Dandelions.
Dandelions. You've never seen those before, right? All right, so how can dandelions teach us some of the, or I should say illustrate some of the lessons we just learned from King Hezekiah and humility? I want to tell you a little bit about the dandelions. Now, we all know dandelions are really annoying things, right? But that's not the purpose of this lesson. We're going to dig a little deeper into the dandelions. Dandelions give, right? They give their pollen to the bees. They give their seeds to the birds, right? They also, if you want to eat them, they're perfectly edible, and they're very nutritious. They're very high in vitamin A, vitamin B, calcium, phosphorus, and iron. You can pick the very, very young and tender leaves in the spring, and they are not quite as bitter as the tough ones. They make great for salad. You can also steam them. And actually, every single part of the dandelion is edible. The dandelion root makes an amazing tea. It's good for liver cleansing. You can make poultices out of them. There's so much that you can do with a dandelion. There is a group of people who live in on the islands of the Bering Sea, and they avoided starvation by simply boiling the dandelion roots, because the locusts or the grasshoppers had come in and eaten every single green herb on the whole island. And the only thing that was left was roots. And they actually survived because of boiling dandelion roots in salt water, and they ate them like potatoes. So, if a spider comes, it also likes to live on the dandelions because it will eat the little bugs that live on the dandelions, right? So if you look at the dandelion as a house, it shares everything it has, doesn't it? If you were invited to the dandelion house, kind of an interesting way to think about it, right? If you were invited to the dandelion house, they would share with you what they have. They would give to you. So the question is, what do you give to people when they come to your house? What did Hezekiah give when the people came to his house? Are you following me now? What are we sharing with the people who come to our house? Are we sharing with them our toys? Are we sharing with them the wonderful riches of Jesus? Are we sharing with them the true gold? And are we giving to them in loving service and in humility? Isn't that a neat lesson from the dandelions? Now, what I shared with you, and of course you have, what did I just do with the book? Here it is. You have the paper now, but what I shared with you was one lesson out of this book. Now, I expounded a little bit on it. The actual lesson, it's right here, is called Service and Ministry. I personally chose my own character quality to go with it. And the story of Hezekiah is not told in here, but the verse is mentioned in the object lesson. And so from there, I took their verse, their Bible story, and expanded and added the Bible story to it. So now your activity, it says, spend some time outdoors carefully watching a dandelion flower. How many insects come to dine at his flower table in 1 hour? All right? Look carefully because some of the insects that live and dine on a dandelion are very small. So that's your little outdoor activity. We're not going to do it today because for one it's hot and for another I want to share with you a little bit more. But I just want to show you how simple these books are to use. Okay, so each book has over 50 lessons. And it has a lesson and an illustration page. And it's all black and white. With the books, you have full copyright permission to copy as many copies for your personal use. If you wanted to use it for a Sabbath school, you have permission to copy it for all the kids in your Sabbath school. If you want to use it for a prayer meeting, you have permission to copy it for everybody in your prayer meeting. Or if you're using it for homeschool, you can copy it for all your kids. That way each child can color their own paper and you don't have to buy more than one book. But I have just really, really been appreciative of the work that's done because they are wonderful workbooks to do. And like I said, with adding a character quality and a Bible story, you can spend more than 5 minutes on it and turn it into a whole school lesson. And this whole book is on dandelions. So every single lesson in this entire book is all different lessons of a dandelion. That was just one of them, okay? By the time you're done with this book, you will not hate dandelions anymore. So let's look at another one. Let's see what else we can learn. So we're going to cool ourselves off a little bit, and we're going to pretend it's winter outside. All right? They have another one called The Gospel According to the Snowflake. So this is an entire book dedicated to just snowflakes. Did you know you could learn that much from a snowflake? And that's only scratching the surface. There's so much you can learn. But we're going to look at one of them. And once again, I like to choose a Bible story to go with it. So let's dive into our Bible story. And I didn't write down where it is actually found. So maybe somebody look it up and find it for me. Find me the story of King Naaman, not king. The general Naaman. Okay, the Naaman the leper, all right? who came to Elisha. And I will tell you the story, and when you guys find where it's found, holler it out at me, okay?
2 Kings 5.
2 Kings 5. I love electronic devices. 2 Kings chapter 5 is the story. You know, this was actually one of my favorite stories as a child. And the hero of the story to me was the little maid. Okay, she's the one we often forget about in this story. But the little maid was a little girl who was kidnapped from her home at a young age and forced into slavery as a personal servant of King Naaman's, or not king, excuse me, of the general Naaman's wife. And you can imagine if you were kidnapped from your home at the age you are now and forced into slavery and become a personal servant, how would you feel? Be pretty discouraging, wouldn't it? I mean, away from home, away from family, away from friends, you know nobody. Probably they didn't speak her language, and they definitely didn't believe in God. So here she is in this heathen country, and she is doing her best to let her light shine for Jesus. And when she finds out that her mistress husband is sick with leprosy, she says, "Oh, I wish you could go see the prophet Elijah." In fact, she didn't even say his name. She said, "I wish you could go to Israel because there he could be healed." Well, Naaman overheard this and he's like, wait, if I can be healed in Israel, what's preventing me from going? I'm like one of the richest, most powerful men in the empire. I'm just going to go over there myself. And so where did he go? He went to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel says, "What on earth did you come visit me for? Like, can I heal leprosy? Do I look like I've ever healed anybody before?" Now let me ask you, did the king of Israel know the prophet Elisha? So why didn't he just tell him, go see the prophet Elisha? Or why didn't the king say, "Prophet Elisha, can you come help me?" But he didn't. The prophet Elijah heard that the king was in distress. Now, I often wonder if an angel told him that, or if one of the king's servants snuck off and told him. But either way, the prophet Elijah knew that the king was in distress. He's like, "Why are you worried? Just send him to me. You know, don't kill yourself over this. Like, have faith in God, you know?" And so he sent him over, and we know the story, right? The prophet Elisha, Prophet Elijah, I can't even talk this morning. I think I'm tired. You guys know why, though, so it's okay. 4 hours of sleep does things to you. The prophet Elisha says to his servant, "I want you to go out and talk to him." He wouldn't even show his face. Okay? He just sat in his house, says, "Okay, servant, I want you to go out and tell him to go away." Right? Where? The Jordan River, and do what? Bathe 7 times. In the muddiest river in the whole country. You know that, right? The nastiest, muddiest, slimiest river in the whole country. So this guy doesn't even come out and speak to his face. Elisha stays in. He's testing Naaman, right? Are you going to obey? Are you going to obey the voice of God? Even if you don't see his face, and he asks you to do the most nasty thing that he could possibly think of. I mean, it's like, go bathe in the swamp, you know? And Naaman's like, "Are you serious? I gotta go bathe in the swamp? I mean, don't you know there's actually clean rivers where I live? Why do I have to bathe in the swamp?" And who was it that changed his mind? His servants. They're like, "Come on, guy. You like drove all the way out here, and now you're just going to go back home when actually you have hope that you could actually be healed by bathing in that swamp?" Well, he hadn't thought of that, so I guess it's worth a try. So he actually obeyed, and he went, and we know the story, right? He dipped 7 times in the muddy water and came out clean, totally healed. He goes back to the prophet Elisha to tell him thank you, and the prophet Elisha says, "No, don't give me anything. The glory goes to God. You obeyed God. He healed you. I didn't do it." So Naaman turns around and goes home. And that's where the story ends, right? No, what happened? His servant, Gehazi, right? His servant says, oh, wait a second. That guy was offering him a lot of money. Why did he just let him go? Like, we could use the money. We're always helping poor people. We're always feeding and clothing those who are hungry. We're always helping other prophets who don't have, are in hard times. Like, we don't need this money for ourselves. We need this for other people. So why didn't he accept it? Well, the reason he didn't accept it was because Elisha wanted him to realize that it was God who did the healing and not him, right? Accepting a gift would be admitting that I actually did it. And that's why. Sure, they did need the money. Sure, they could have used the clothes to feed those who didn't have any, but no, they had to get the lesson home that it was God who healed them. But Gehazi says, I'm going to sneak out. Elisha won't know what I'm doing. He snuck out and he raced after him, and what did he do? Says, prophet changed his mind. He didn't say, I want it. He said, the prophet changed his mind. And he, some prophets came to visit us, and he really needs some food to give them and some clothing to send them on their way. Was that true? No, nobody had come to visit them. He made up the story. Naaman's like, absolutely, here, take all you want. So Gehazi took this giant load of stuff, and he went and hid it, and then came back in the house and pretended to sweep the floor. But did Elisha know what happened? God told him, didn't he? And Gehazi's disobedience was found out. And because of his disobedience, the leprosy that Naaman had went to Gehazi for the rest of his life. So we have a very, very stark story of obedience and disobedience. What does all this have to do with snowflakes? All right, let's find out. Can I ask you to do it again? Thank you so much. How many points are in a snowflake? How many points are in a snowflake? There are 6 points in a snowflake. And in our lesson, we know that God gave us how many commandments? 10 commandments. It was 4 between us and God and 6 between us and our fellow men. So we are going to take the 6 points of the snowflake and equate them to the 6 commandments that are between us and our fellow men. Okay? And he's passing this out so you can look at them. What are those 6 commandments? Say them with me. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. And thou shalt not covet. 6 points of the snowflake. And I really like the lesson in this. We're going to change our character quality for this one to guess what? Obedience. That's right. Okay, so with obedience, I want to look at these 6 commandments in a different way. The first one is, when you receive Christ's love, you will desire to honor your parents. Right? When you receive Christ's love, you will desire to honor your parents. Isn't that a beautiful way of looking at the 5th commandment? All right, let's look at the next one. You will preserve your right and my right to live. Okay? So if it's my right and your right, that means the way I treat my body has something to do with that too, doesn't it? All right, the next one. You will be morally pure. Now that has more than just outward actions, doesn't it? That has to do with the way we think and the way our heart is. Next one. You will respect another's right to ownership. All right, and you will be honest and true to everyone. Last of all, you will be grateful and content with what you have. Isn't that a beautiful way of looking at those 6 commandments? And it's all because you receive Christ's love into your heart. When you receive Christ's love into your heart, He transforms your life just like He makes this beautiful snowflake. And through these 6 sides, He helps us to desire to honor our parents, to preserve the right to live, to be morally pure, respect one another's ownership, be honest and true, and grateful and content with what we have. Isn't that a beautiful lesson from the snowflake? And once again, that was taken from this book. Let me see if I can find the page. I don't know if I have the page number printed on here. There it is. That was the lesson taken from this. And of course, what I did, and of course it tells a little bit more too. I want to tell you a little more about the scientific lesson here. A bit of wind-blown dust becomes the center of this snow crystal. Droplets of water vapor crystallize around it, forming a perfect hexagon shape. The snow crystal grows in size as it falls through the air. This finger-like growth happens on all the sides of the hexagon as moisture crystallizes there. Each of the 6 fingers or rays connect together in the middle of the crystal around that bit of dust. These rays are separated one from another by exactly 60 degrees. This separation of 60 degrees is what I call the divine law of the snow crystal. Obedience to this law is what gives snow its beautiful hexagon pattern. This law of a snow crystal and the law of God have the same author. The law of God is a law of love, and we are commanded to love one another. The way we love one another is in these 6 commandments. Isn't that beautiful? All from a snowflake. And like I said, I added obedience was kind of an obvious character quality that went along with that. And then I went and found a Bible story that illustrated obedience. The practical project for this one you can do indoors, which is really nice. It says, draw your own hexagon. So you will learn a little geometry here. Draw a hexagon which has 6 equally sided triangles. List the last 6 of the 10 commandments, placing 1 commandment per side on your hexagon. How do these 6 commandments preserve the individuality of each of your family members? Isn't that a fun practical project to go with that? Aren't these books simple to use? You want to do another one? This is fun, isn't it? All right, so we're going to get rid of winter and go back to spring. And we're going to look at the blade of grass. Did you know that you could learn this many lessons from a blade of grass? The gospel according to a blade of grass. This one is a fun one. But I'm going to start with the Bible story. I always, when I ever do these, I always like to start with the Bible story and then see how science illustrates the Bible story. And it's always amazing what you can find. So, our Bible story is on Elisha. Now, we already had one story on Elisha, right, with Elisha and Naaman. But this is earlier in his ministry. When Elisha was a young man, he lived in a rich family. His father had servants. But even though he had a rich family, did he sit and watch television all day? Well, there weren't any televisions back then. But, okay, did he sit and play video games all day? No, they didn't have those either. But he did not sit around and do whatever he would have done. I don't know what they did back then instead of video games and television, okay? But what was he doing? He worked in the fields. Now, his dad had plenty enough servants who could have done all the work in the fields while he sat down and put his feet up. But did he do that? No. He worked with the servants. Okay? Now, I'm quite sure that most of you don't have servants in your house. But I have to say, if he was able to spend his time working and pulling his share of the load in the family even while they had servants, you certainly can if you don't have any, right? But he was faithful to the work that was nearest to him, even when it was a very little thing. And Elisha became a young man. I imagine he was probably about college age. He could have done great things. What was he doing when the prophet Elijah walked through the field? He was plowing the field. He was doing that little menial task that lied nearest him. And it was because of that, we are told, that he was fitted to do greater things. So Elijah comes, he places his mantle on Elisha's back, and he walks away. Elisha says, wait a second, let me tell my parents goodbye, and I'm coming with you right now. Do you know what Elisha's first work was when he started working with Elijah? Now remember, Elijah's this great prophet, right? He's worked miracles. He's done all these amazing things. He's stopped the land from having rain for 3 years. He's talked to kings. He's done all this stuff. And Elisha's probably thinking, wow, you know, this is pretty important. I'm working with this great guy. What did Elisha do? Anyone know? There's one Bible verse in 2 Kings that says, yes.
He poured water over his head?
He poured water on the hands of Elijah. Do you know what that means? Okay, they didn't have faucets back then. So that meant that Elisha was Elijah's personal servant. It meant he was the one that walked to the well, drawed the water, walked all the way back, and poured the water on Elijah's hands so he could wash his hands so he could eat breakfast. Okay? He was Elijah's personal servant. Now, if you were called to be a prophet, how would you feel about that? Kind of a letdown, right? I mean, that's not really what I was expecting. I was expecting, like, maybe he'd let me preach once in a while, and, he'd let me in on some of his teaching that he's doing. I'm just a personal servant. That's all I am. I just sweep the floor, wash the dishes, I cook, and I haul the water. Was that what Elisha did? He didn't say that, but that's what he did. He just did the work. And he said, God, I will be faithful in the little things that lie nearest to me. And because he was faithful in those little things at home, and he was faithful in those little things with the prophet Elijah, when Elijah went to heaven, Elisha was given a double portion of the same spirit that was on Elijah. A double portion, meaning he was able to do twice as many great things as Elijah had ever done. And why was he able to receive that double portion? Because he was faithful in the little things. They're pretty important, aren't they? So let's look at some little things. I'll let you pass these around. we don't have a microscope, but we're going to look at a picture of a magnifying glass / microscope at a blade of grass and a little square piece of dirt. Blade of grass and a little square piece of dirt. So I'll wait until you all have the picture here. I'm going to erase the last story. What do you think our character quality is for this story? Faithfulness, that's right. Everybody have one? Almost everybody has one? We're getting there, slowly but surely. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a scientist by the name of David Prammer, and he worked at Rutgers University. And he was looking through a microscope one day, and he was absolutely astonished at what he saw in this microscope. Now, when you look under a microscope, you see all of these little, almost look like animals. Like it's alive, right? So you have fungus, that's a living organism. You have bacteria. You have what they call amoebas. There's all kinds of things, right, that are living down at microscopic level. Well, this particular day, he watched as, does anyone know what an amoeba is? Okay, I'm going to tell you. An amoeba is basically something that looks like this. It's a blob that is one cell. Okay, now you are made up of billions, trillions, quadrillions of cells, right? If you look at a little patch of skin, you'll still see like thousands of cells, right? But an amoeba is an animal that is only one cell. So he's looking at a one-celled creature, but this one happened to be a one-celled plant that was a fungus, okay? So this one cell, all of a sudden, starts producing this little thread, okay? The thread was 1/200th of a millimeter in thickness. Now, you know how big a millimeter is? Now imagine 1/200th of a millimeter. That's like, obviously you can only see it with a microscope, right? Okay, so this thread that it was weaving was as strong as steel. And the plant formed a loop on this thread. Can you see my loop here? And this little, obviously microscopic, Nemo worm comes charging in. And as soon as the Nemo worm got inside it, the plant closed the lasso around this Nemo worm and got him. The loop then inflated like a rubber inner tube and caught the Nemo worm around the waist. And then the fungus ate the Nemo worm. Can you imagine watching that under a microscope? That'd be so much fun. There are hordes of invisible microscopic life that we do not see, that live in the dirt and in the grass, that we just walk on every day and take for granted. The interesting thing is, let's see if, do we have any mathematicians in this audience? Can anyone tell me the size of an acre? How many feet is in an acre? Anybody know? All right, somebody look it up on Google then. Tell me the size of an acre.
43,560 square feet.
Okay, so what's the dimensions? What by what? Can you find that?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take square root. Says,
We do have a mathematician in this audience. Anybody know what's the dimensions of an acre? How many feet by how many feet?
says I don't know, 208.71, is that right?
208, yes? By what?
By 208?
Okay? So let's say 208 by 208, approximately, is an acre. All right? So, that's not that huge of a piece of land, right? Anyone want to guess how many pounds, okay? How many pounds of microscopic life lives in an acre of soil? How many pounds? How many pounds? Not how many. Yeah, you're right. There would be trillions. 2,000 pounds is your guess?
10,000.
10,000. Okay. He's shooting for the gold here. 10,000 pounds. That acre of soil must weigh a lot. How much does an acre of soil weigh? The bacteria can't weigh more than the soil, okay? How much? 7 pounds? Okay. So we've got a guess of 7 pounds. 56 pounds? Now you guys are going really small. How much does an acre of soil weigh? How deep? 6 inches deep. 6 inches deep. So
I'll change my guess to probably like
2,000?
2,000.
Okay. That sounds like a more realistic figure. Okay. So the amount of bacteria in 6 inches of soil in 1 acre. You ready for this? Okay. It's 2,000 pounds of fungus. So you got the fungus right. Okay. It says several tons of bacteria. And a ton is how many pounds? 2,000. So if we got several, let's say 6,000, right? 6,000 pounds of bacteria. All right. 200 pounds of protozoa, which is one-celled animals. $100 pounds of algae. And 100 pounds of yeast. So, I think the winner is the guy who said 10,000 pounds. Let's add this up. 2,000 pounds plus 6,000 pounds is what? 8,000? And then we got 200 and 100 and 100. So that's another 500, right? So, I can't count. You're right, 400. So we've got 8,400 pounds. That is a lot of invisible creatures, don't you think? That you just walk on every day? Now, do you ever say you're sorry for walking on them? Or maybe, do you ever thank them for what they did for you? Let me tell you what these creatures do, okay? You may not be able to see them, but let me tell you what they do. They eat dead plants. They eat dead animals. They produce decay, which releases the locked elements that are unusable by the plants. It releases them so the plants can actually eat them. So the only reason that we have grass today is because of that 8,400 pounds of invisible creatures that work hard so that acre of land can have grass. Now, that goes for more than just grass. That also goes for trees. That goes for your garden. That goes for the vegetables you eat. It pretty much goes for everything on this entire planet. If all of those invisible creatures died today, we would be extinct tomorrow. We would cease to exist. Like, we cannot live. Because what would happen? All the trees would die, all the plants would die, all the grass would die, and we wouldn't have oxygen. And we would die. We'd suffocate. Right. And if we did somehow have a magical source of oxygen, we would starve to death. So no matter how you look at it, we owe our lives to those invisible creatures that work all day long and all night long so that we can live. Those little bitty creatures are faithful in the little things. Right? And because they are faithful in the little things, God sustains our lives and our entire world through their faithfulness. So let me ask you, do you think if little microscopic bacteria and fungus and protozoa and algae and yeast is that important, do you think it's important that we be faithful in the little things? Isn't that an incredible lesson from the blade of grass? And I'll show you the lesson here. This is the lesson that I used. And the whole lesson is there, except, of course, I added the character quality of faithfulness and the story of Elisha. And the family project, it says, go to your backyard and dig up a few tablespoons of topsoil. Spread it out onto white paper and look at it carefully with a magnifying glass. If you have a microscope, you can. Our family didn't, so we used a magnifying glass. Do you see any signs of life? It teems with life unseen, and we owe our lives to their ministry in the plant world. Isn't that exciting? The things that we can learn from God's little creatures. So yes, the entire book is the gospel according to blade of grass. Every single lesson comes from grass. You want one more? The tree. You imagine a whole book on just not all the different kinds of trees, but all the aspects of the tree that we can learn nature object lessons from. And it's not all of them. There's so many more that it doesn't cover, but at least it's a start. So we're going to go back to our Bibles again. And we're going to turn to the book of Genesis. Book of Genesis. And we are going to look at chapter, if I can turn here to it. Chapter 24. Genesis chapter 24 is a beautiful story. And of course, we don't have time for the entire story, but Isaac is old enough to get married. And Abraham wants to find a wife for his son. And so he sends his servant to his home country to find a godly, God-fearing wife. And his servant prays a prayer. He says, God, whoever it is, here's what I want her to do. What is it? Anyone know? What was she supposed to do? She was supposed to first, he was going to ask her for a drink. And she was supposed to say, yes, drink, and I will water your camels. Okay? Without him asking, will you water my camels? Right? He's just simply asking for a drink, which is, just a very small amount of water. And he says, God, if she waters my camels too, then she's the one. And of course, we know what happened. Rebecca comes out, right? And he's immediately drawn to her. And so he comes up to her and says, excuse me, may I please have a drink? I am thirsty. And she says, yes. And then she looks over and sees all those camels. Now, I wish I had it with me, But yesterday, we were teaching at our 8 Laws of Health thing, we were teaching about water. And did you know that a camel can drink 25 gallons of water in 10 minutes? And how many camels did Eliezer have? 10 of them. How much water is that in 10 minutes? 250 gallons of water in 10 minutes. And how is she getting this water? Did she just turn on a faucet? No, she's like drawing this water by hand out of a well, right? With a bucket and carrying it. Can you imagine 25 gallons of water in 10 minutes? That's just an astronomical amount of water. And she says, yes, drink and I will gladly water your camels. What character quality would you think fit that story? Helpfulness, yes. Helpfulness. And boy, I tell you, Rebecca was well trained at home, wasn't she? I mean, how many of us would volunteer to haul 250 gallons of water with a bucket? Helpfulness. And of course, we know the story because she was willing to be helpful. Because she was willing to sacrifice herself and do that, she became one of the lineage of Jesus. What an honor was hers because of her willingness to be helpful. So, I told you a camel drank 25 gallons in 10 minutes. But that wasn't actually the amount of water that a camel stops drinking. A camel can actually drink 30 to 50 gallons in one sitting. The 25 gallons is just in the first 10 minutes. So now do your math at 10 camels at 50 gallons of water. Ten camels at 50 gallons of water? 500 gallons. Can you imagine? So, what does this have to do with trees? We have one more handout, I think. Yeah. We have one more handout here. If you want to pass, I'm going to stick one. Sorry. You can pass those out. I guess we have two. Someone else want to do one too? Or you want to just give each other half?
Oh, that works.
Half of each. Everybody give everybody two different ones. So the tree is very important, right? But there's something amazing about a forest. How many of you have walked through a forest? Well, if you've been here long enough, you've walked through one probably today or yesterday, right? We've got forests right out here. When you walked through a forest, have you ever stopped to think about what kind of community the forest has? Did you know that trees talk? Did you know that trees talk? They actually communicate. Now, they don't talk in English. Okay, we're the only ones that do that. But trees talk. And if you walk through a forest, you are walking in the middle of a conversation. You ever thought about that? Do you know the trees talk to each other? So, let me tell you how this works. It's very fascinating. So, in a forest, you have what? You've got all kinds of trees, right? You've got the big trees, right? And then you got the small ones, the little spindly ones, right? And you got some more big trees. Obviously, I'm only drawing the trunks because I'm not an artist, so I can't draw a tree. My mom tried to teach me, I promise, she's an artist, but I didn't learn. So, you have little trees, right? Got the little baby ones. Now, I grew up in Washington State, so to me a tree has pine needles. Here they have leaves. So, the big trees and the little trees and the medium-sized trees have a way of communication through a special fungus. And this fungus grows underground and actually connects all of the trees by the roots. It's a fungus. It's not the actual roots of the tree. It's a fungus that grows between all the tree roots, and it actually connects them so that they have one complete pattern of communication through this fungus. Okay? And it's really amazing. If, let's say, this big tree here gets attacked by a beetle, okay? The beetles come and attack it, and they try to destroy the tree. This tree sends a frantic message to all the other trees that I'm being attacked by a beetle. And guess what all the other trees do? They increase their sap flow. So that way if the beetle comes over and bites them, the sap will push it out. There's also another way that these trees communicate. Another thing that they do, with the fungus, and that is these little bitty trees right here, okay? The little baby trees next to the big trees. How much light do you think those little trees get? They don't get very much, right? Because they're kind of blocked in. How much rain do those trees get? Not very much either, because the umbrella of the tree above them is kind of blocking the rain, right? So this tree here is getting a lot more nutrients. Also, how deep of a root do you think this tree has versus that little bitty guy, right? So this tree is getting nutrients from way down below, and it's getting more rain and sunshine and air and everything else up top than this little baby. But the little baby doesn't die. Why is that? That fungus actually helps this tree to send nutrients to the little baby tree through the roots. So it's actually transferring nutrients from the big tree to the baby one. Now they actually did a study, because when they discovered this fungus, they were like, no, impossible. There's no way that they could actually transmit nutrients, right? So they set up a test forest, all these trees, and they let them grow until that fungus connected them all by the roots, okay? And then they put like plastic around these trees, and they like cut down deep so that nothing from the soil of one tree could get to the soil of the other tree, right? They blocked it all off. And then in some trees, they gave it a special fertilizer that it really likes. And they skipped the other trees. And they waited, and then they tested the trees. And guess what? All of the trees had the fertilizer. Not just the ones they gave the fertilizer to. So they tested the soil. Well, maybe there was some contamination, maybe it crossed over. Tested the soil, no fertilizer in the soil. Tested the tree's leaves, definitely results of the fertilizer had been put into the tree. How did it happen? Through that beautiful root system of the trees being helpful to help each other. Isn't that incredible? So when we think about the story of Rebecca and how she was helpful, and we think about how the trees help one another, what does that do with us and our families? Are we not, as families, to help each other? To feed each other what we have been learning? To encourage one another with the Bible promises we're memorizing? To pray for one another? Because as a family unit, you are just like that tree community. And then when you are helpful to each other within your family, then your family can be helpful to the rest of the world. Isn't that fun?
Amen.
What we can learn from tree, and that's just one lesson. That was page 38 in this book here. And the practical project. Blindfold your children and take them on a walk in the trail through the forest to a tree of your choice. Let them examine the tree while blindfolded, perhaps through smell as well as touch, because some trees have a peculiar fragrance. Then bring them back to the trail, take off the blindfold, and ask them to go find the tree. Sound like fun? Then reverse this and let your children blindfold you and see if you can figure out which tree. Doesn't that sound like a fun family activity? All right. Another activity, a family can plant a tree for each family member. Each child can have a certificate for their own tree and could have a yearly photo taken with their tree. Wouldn't that be fun? As the tree and the child grow together, they can learn to care for their tree. Just some really fun, neat ways that you can teach science from the Bible. Isn't that incredible? Like, you can make those boring scientific facts like totally come alive and become part of me. I just love it. So we have a few minutes. I want to tell you, like I said earlier, I am the one who distributes these materials. But for this weekend, UG Pines has graciously carried all of these in their store. And so they will have them for sale when you go over for lunch. In their bookstore, there is a table set up with all of just these materials, and I'm going to show you a few more. They are $15 a piece, which is a very, very reasonable deal for that kind of book. And if you get all four, you can have all four for $55. I encourage you to get all four, because if you get one and decide you wished you got more, you can contact me and you'll have to pay shipping. But I want to show you a few more things that he's put out. In addition to books, he has a few DVDs that he has put out, which is really nice when you need an indoor rainy nature activity, especially like Sabbath afternoons and stuff when the weather is really bad and you have to be indoors. This one is a short one called The Cross of Christ is Seen in Nature. It's basically simply stories of how survival of the fittest did not happen. So, stories where it was reversed and where an animal laid down its life for somebody else or another animal. He's got creation versus evolution plus dinosaurs. All of his presentations are basically filming him giving a presentation live in a church. He has PowerPoint presentations, so there's nature pictures with the whole thing. And the thing I love about all of his presentations is he ends with a black light chalk drawing. He's an amazing artist. And so he's got a different one on every single one of these DVDs. This one is a companion DVD to the book, The Gospel According to Dandelion. And so it's actually him giving a 60-minute presentation on the wonders of a dandelion with full color pictures and some of his own experiences with dandelions. This one is one of his newer ones. It's a worship hymn, and it's a 45-minute presentation on what is worship and how we can worship God through nature. It just really helps you look at worship in a whole new way. There's another one on called How to Heart Read Nature. It's basically simply how to go out and find those nature object lessons like we've been doing today. And then another new one. This one I always call Darwin and the Cross, because it says the cross is seen in nature, which is a similar title to this one here. But this one part 2 is what it is. So it's even more of those stories. It's 15 new stories on how you can see the cross and self-sacrifice displayed in the world of nature as opposed to survival of the fittest. So those are the short ones that he has. And then he has 2 series. This one is called Origins, the First Week in Time. And it's actually an 8-part evangelistic series on the week of creation. It was specifically geared for children, adults, and anyone who is not even a Christian. So if you have, a neighbor that you want to invite to your house, it's a non-threatening approach to introduce them to God and the God of creation. And so he goes through all the days of the week, of course, including Sabbath. And it's just really a powerful evangelistic series on creation. And of course, there's eight lectures in that one, so this one is a little more expensive. But it's $24 for the 8-part set, which is very reasonable. And then his prize. This is his pride and joy. It's the biggest one that he's ever done. It's called In His Image. And this is a college course in anatomy and physiology from the Bible. And it's absolutely incredible. Of course, it's not just for college students. It's geared simple enough that even children can understand it. It's a wonderful homeschool tool if you're looking for practical anatomy and physiology that's combined with the Bible and looking to our Creator, God. This is actually a 9-part series. It's got 2 full, let me see. Yes, it's a 9-part series. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. It says it's aimed at junior high students, but it has something for everyone aged 9 to 99. So if you want to learn more fascinating things about the human body like you did yesterday, this is an amazing series. So like I said, all of these DVDs and books will be for sale at lunch. And so if you want to get them, now's a great time when you don't have to pay shipping for them. Also, I brought a few bonus DVDs as not by Pastor McComb. I brought a few. They are just nature. That's all it is. They are by Canadian Wildlife Productions, which is an Adventist naturalist in Canada. And I like the fact that there's no evolution. But there's very little talking and very little action. It's one of those more quiet, less dramatic nature. You get nature footage as far as animals as well as scenery. And you get a naturalist or a scientist or someone talking about the animals and what they're doing. And I think I have like 6 or 7 different ones. And they're not high definition. They were done about 10 to 20 years ago. And so because they are a little bit not quite as dated, they are on sale for $6 a piece for those. And that's while supplies last. So any questions? Yes?
Just out of curiosity, we talk about the trees. When they're receiving the nutrient from different trees, right? Are they the same species of trees or can they be different species?
They can be different species. Yes, and that's why that picture that I handed out to you, you notice you've got the lodgepole pine, the cedar, the Douglas fir, the birch, ponderosa pine, and cottonwood. They all communicate together. It doesn't have to be the same species. So that's the other fascinating thing, because it's the fungus that connects them all. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm just kind of curious, how do you know the process of figuring out what Bible story you're going to use for your
What I did when I was looking through these is I chose Bible lessons that I had personally been studying in my devotions that best illustrated these lessons. So when I read through the nature lesson, oftentimes, like I said, it'll have a Bible verse or something that will cue you in to an actual Bible story. But really, all of these can go with any Bible story. And that's the beautiful thing. So the one that you have studied the most recent is going to be the most relevant, because you are going to be passionate about it yourself and know the most about that story and be able to teach it to your children. Because there's so many lessons that you can, and stories that you can choose for each one. Any other questions? Yes? The author is Pastor Terry McComb, and he is currently a retired pastor in British Columbia. He keeps saying he's retired. I think he's retired like 3 times, and he keeps going back to be a stipend lay pastor because he enjoys it so much. I don't think he'll ever retire. Any other questions? All right. Why don't we close with a word of prayer, and then don't leave because I have a very important announcement. Our precious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for these wonderful things that you have taught us through the world of nature. There's so much more you want to teach us, Lord. And I just ask that you will guide each of us as we study ourselves, that you will teach us what you would have us to learn. And Lord, I just pray that you will continue to be with us as we continue on with our day's activities and learning, that you will draw close to us and help us to not forget these things we're learning now. And we thank you in Jesus' name, amen.